Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome David Olson. He's a physician assistant. Today's Kevin MD article is Taking a Break from Medicine, a Journey to Rediscover Joy and Purpose. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks. So
Uh,
I've spent the last 12 years working, living in Oklahoma. I spent, 10 years as a hospitalist and then the last 2 years in primary care for a value-based system. And really kind of during that time got pretty burnout. I spent a couple years on the leadership team at the hospital system, saw our group change out and we're taken over from a hospital by or a hospital owned company by, private equity companies that are, taking over so
yeah.
much of medicine these days. So kind of went through a lot as far as saw a lot of people come and go and really kind of got to a place where I was pretty burnout and kind of realized that I needed a break.
Okay.
Kind of talked things over as far as with my wife, and we kind of made the decision just to kind of take a year off and just go travel the world with the kids. So, like in medicine, we often take our families for granted and they kind of get put on the back burner while we're dealing with other things. And this was a chance to really kind of make up for that and try and make sure that, I don't miss out on everything as far as that's important when it comes to family. So that's kind of what the article was about.
So tell me, before you made a decision to travel the world, what were some of the specific things about medicine that was burning you out and taking away your time and energy from your family?
Just a lot of it was as far as, you know, patients these days, as far as you deal with just so much grief.
Hmm.
They don't trust you. They're mad at you no matter what you do. You give them, you know, good medical advice as far as how to manage their diabetes, and they just completely ignore you and say, "No, I'm not taking anything. I've decided somebody told me fixes my diabetes." And these things that you just want to go pound your head into the wall, and you're like, "Nah, I'm being judged on,
Hmm.
whether you take the meds as far as when it comes to Medicare and everything." And it just gets frustrating as far as in the hospitals. It was really getting frustrating as far as the company that I worked for. If you were busy and you worked extra, that was just part of the day. But if there was ever a slow day, they're like, well, let's send you home or let's send you to a different facility. So you didn't know where you were going to work from one day to the next. And that gets frustrating if you have things planned and you think, oh, I'm working 2 minutes away from my house, and then you wind up being shipped to a hospital. It's an hour away. It kind of screws up your day. So lack of continuity when it comes to the hospital system, like I said, just kind of some of the frustrations with patients. Those were just a few of the things that were just kind of burning out. And then I think for me, being on the leadership team also was one of those things to where, particularly being on one during a transition period where we went from over 90% of the providers left during the transition. So kind of going through all that was definitely stressful as well.
Now, give us a sense of how long you were practicing before taking this break.
12 years.
Okay.
So, and I had it had been pretty much nonstop except because I went 10 years without ever changing jobs essentially. And then when I did change, I took a month off and we went actually and spent 3 to 4 weeks traveling around Southeast Asia. So we
Mhm.
kind of had a little bit of a taste of this 2 years ago. And that was part of what led us into thinking about this as more of a longer term thing. That was a fun adventure. We got to see and do a lot of things, but at the same time, it's still just a small little window, particularly. I mean, there's such a big world to see. So I love to travel, and there's so many places I want to see. And, I'd like to get to experience with my family. So
Now, how much of the burnout is attributable to the company, the specific company you're working for, versus primary care or hospital medicine as a whole?
I think it's definitely a mix. The companies I was with definitely played a role as
Mhm.
far as with that. But then again, as far as the time, I mean, I think I just needed a little bit of a break. When you've got patients who are threatening you,
Hmm.
making threats about, well, my last doctor was shot and killed, and I'm gonna start hurting people if I don't get my pain controlled and
Hmm.
things like that. You're just like, man, I need a break. I need some time away. So I think it was definitely a mixture of everything and kind of combined. And I actually was at a conference where I was talking to a guy and we were talking about burnout, and he had actually taken a year off, just a year break, and then kind of came back to medicine afterwards. And he said, like you sound like you need a break.
Yeah.
So
So what was that conversation like with your wife when making that decision to take this extended break away from medicine?
he was actually very open to it, very supportive. I think she realized some of the struggles that I'd been dealing with, some of the frustrations that I've had for a while. So it was actually fairly easy. So because it was something we'd kind of talked about, I think, bits and pieces before. So, but it was actually easier than you'd probably think.
So how long have you been away from medicine? How far into your trip are you?
I left my job in December.
Hmm.
Uh, and we started traveling in January. So we've been in traveling a little over 3 months. So we're in our fourth country, and we've kind of got rough plans for the next couple months. And then we'll spend a couple more months in Asia, and then we'll head to Europe after that, kind of for the second half of the year. And we'll kind of just go from there.
And was there any reaction from friends, family, colleagues when you decided to take this extended break from medicine?
It's kind of a mix as far as a lot of people just say, "Oh, that's so awesome. I wish I could do something like that." That's definitely get a lot of those responses. And then a lot of people are also like, "Are what about your family? Are you going to take your family?" So it's kind of, and I'm like, "Yeah, they're coming too." So it's a little bit of both. There's definitely, like I said, that segment who's like, "Oh man, I want to do that,"
Hmm.
but I don't think but I can't. I think that's most people's reaction to something like this is they're, "Oh, that sounds great, but I can't do it." And in reality, it is very doable. It kind of forces you to think about things differently. It forces you to make some, decisions about how you want to survive over a year. But it's something to where just about anybody really can do as far as in the medical system. I mean, I've been a PA for the last 12 years. My wife stayed at home with the kids, so we're a single family income and it's doable.
Now, what separated you from your colleagues? Because so many of your colleagues said they wish they could have done what you did but couldn't. So, what made you different in terms of following through with your decision?
A lot of people think about stuff and plan on things. They have analysis paralysis, but they never take that final step that actually become a doer and actually, take that last step.
Hmm.
Uh, and I mean, some areas of life, I've kind of felt like that at times where it's like you think about it for a long time and you're like, oh, well, yeah, I should go ahead and buy that property or do that. And I think I was just to the point where I needed a break. It seemed like it was a good time with kids. They're young. I figured if we're going to do it, this is a good time. The girls are 5, my son's 8. Do it while they're not super established. They're not going to miss anything.
Hmm.
They can pick up things pretty quickly. So it just seemed like it was a good time to do it. I know one of the things that I had a patient actually say early on when I started working was that really stuck with me was how they'd spent, their whole life working. They just retired. They had all these big plans, and they're like, now I can't stay out of the hospital.
Hmm.
And that was one of those things I was like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that person who's sitting there, you know, later in life and just regretting all the things they wanted to do. So I decided this was a chance to actually, make a change to get out there and travel, see the world with my kids and family, and just take a mini break.
Now, have you thought about your medicine plans after your break? Have you put some thought in terms of what you're going to do next afterwards?
A little bit. I've just kind of started thinking about that really over the last couple weeks. And, I think it's one of those things. I'm going to kind of take some time, probably over the next couple months, trying to really figure that out as far as what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? When we go back, I don't know that we would necessarily go to the same area we were in Oklahoma, or whether we might try to be somewhere closer to family.
Sure.
So, started thinking about it a little bit just because, oftentimes with medicine, you do have to kind of plan ahead.
So, what kind of advice do you have for your colleagues who may be in a similar position to where you were? They're burnt out and having a difficult professional practice situation, and they're thinking of maybe changing careers, changing jobs, even taking an extended break like you have. What kind of advice do you have for these people?
I would say do it. It's very doable. Like I said, most people, look at this and just say, "Oh, that's so great, but I can't do that." And that's just a limiting belief that it's something that anybody can do. It just takes some time and some research, some education on figuring out, what's the best way to travel? How can you do it on a budget? How can you do it with a family and with small kids? So there's a way to do it. And it's very doable. So it's one of those things I would tell them anybody can do this. You can do it as far as, 6 months, doesn't have to be a year. If anybody ever had any questions, they can always feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to, talk people through it if there was anything they wanted to know.
Any feelings of guilt from taking this extended break from medicine? As a PA, of course, you devoted a lot of your education towards becoming a PA. Of course, physicians devote a lot of time as well. Any guilt from taking this extended break from something that you trained so hard to become?
From that standpoint, no. I think the guilt that I felt the most has actually been when my kids talk about how they miss stuff from home.
Mhm.
That's been the guilt I've felt as far as when, they talk about missing friends or missing school. That's I think the hardest part that's been for me from a guilt standpoint.
We're talking to David Olson. He's a physician assistant, and today's Kevin MD article is Taking a Break from Medicine, a journey to rediscover joy and purpose. David, let's end with some take-home messages they want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah, I think the important thing is, if people are dealing as far as with burnout, to realize that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to take some time off to, self-reflect, to try and look at other opportunities, to just take some time off with family to recharge, to make sure that you've got your priorities straight
Mhm.
and are focused on the important things.
David, thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks.